Recording has begun, Madam Mayor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I would like to officially call this meeting to order. I'm going to do a roll call first. Councilman Goldsmith. I see you. Councilman Trollinger. Councilman Trollinger here? All right, Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
Present.
And Councilman, oh, there's Councilman Trollinger and Councilman Jenkins.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. I see you, Councilman Trollinger.
Present, thanks.
If you would all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. Well, we have a fantastic evening planned for you all tonight. We are going to start off with our PayPoint HR presentation of strategic plan and organizational study.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Hello there.
Can you hear me okay?
Can you introduce yourself for the record so we have that and then go right into the presentation?
Sure. My name is Karen Campbell. I'm with PayPoint HR, and we were contracted by the town of La Plata to conduct a strategic planning and organizational design study. So I appreciate all of you being here, and I guess, Michelle, will you be controlling the PowerPoint?
No, actually, Kevin, or Craig or Kelly will be.
Okay, so we can go ahead to the first slide if we want to. Okay, so this slide really just goes over the report and the major milestones within the report. And first, I'd like to go into the project approach, which will be on the next slide. Yeah, perfect. Alrighty. So this slide should not necessarily look new for the council. This was what we presented to you initially prior to being selected to conduct this study. But basically, the main point here is that we had major milestones and output that we wanted to complete and deliverables we wanted to make available to the town of La Plata, which followed this basic methodology, starting out with setting kind of our goals and articulating what it is we wanted to have as outcomes, back to what's in orange, and that's developing a workforce for growth, basically, and looking at succession planning. So we can go ahead to the next slide. Perfect. So when you talk about strategic planning, there's a lot of moving parts, and I think this slide kind of depicts that. But the main systems at work and ones we considered throughout the study was organizational design. That's more or less the org chart and all of the different kind of demands required of a municipal government and what you need to represent and the stakeholders that you represent. But then organizational development looks to, how do you prepare those people in those positions to what is going to be expected of them? And then, of course, you can't ignore community relationships. You have to find out what it is the community wants of the organization. There's always factors like the pandemic or financial factors that a municipality must take into account. And something that goes throughout all of these systems when you're looking at coming up with transition and succession planning is change management, and that touches all of the systems. And in order to be able to do that and do it well, you have to have collaboration, which kind of takes me into the next slide. And this is, I call it involvement, but typically we call it outreach, but I think it was more internal than that. We incorporated around September 17th, a project team kickoff meeting. From that, we plan to have a town council retreat that was held on September 29th for a full day, and then we reconvene in mid-October. And throughout the study, we asked town council for feedback throughout, and more or less came up with what we wanted for this project to entail, which is coming up with a vision, mission, and value concept, looking for areas of opportunity. During the retreat, we did do a SWOT analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the town. And we identified things that La Plata treasures and wouldn't want to change. It wouldn't want to have an outside consultant come in and change. And then we defined key organizational design factors and priorities, kind of going from there. And we can go ahead to the next slide. Thanks. So as part of involving and collaborating with all of the stakeholders, we included employees and department heads, and we held 8 different sessions over the course of several days. And we incorporated department heads as well with their feedback and some major takeaways from focus group sessions. By the way, we had about an 80% participation rate by staff. They were voluntary, the focus groups, but we did have a very good participation, which makes me believe that employees found this process to be important and found the outlook for and the vision for La Plata to be important to them. But what employees stated was that they saw increasing demand and increasing workload for the small staff there at La Plata, and employees felt that the workload was such that it made sense to add additional staffing. And then while the pandemic's created uncertainties with people working remotely and not certain of what work would look like going forward, what they did note is that in public sector, something that is a little bit unique is that demand is 24/7, and a lot of the services provided by the town are services that are not able to be completed remotely. They are in person. Staff mentioned compliance, and what they mentioned with regards to that is that state and fed regulations are putting additional responsibilities on them, and that historically the town has been a very good steward of taxpayer money and providing value for its residents. Employees stated that the town did a good job of balancing being a good steward of resident taxpayer funding, but also of being an employer. So the town is a pleasant place to work. People enjoy coming to work each day. And the town has a good balance between those that have institutional knowledge and those that have outside knowledge and kind of bring best practices to the table. Employees, and we'll go into this more in depth in looking at some of the analysis that we completed, but they had a good pulse on realizing that the population and population density and the geographic footprint for La Plata, they felt was going to grow. And employees, interestingly, welcomed community participation, and that's not something that we see with every one of our clients. So that was refreshing to hear, and that staff wanted to have additional events and meetings and have more residents attend those meetings. And employees appreciated any training and resources that were provided by the town for them to not only better themselves, but also better the community. So we can go to the next slide. Strategic planning. So outcomes for strategic planning. What we created was a promotional tool, I suppose, that the town can use going forward. This tool is available in a PDF format, but also I welcome the town to access the original document. So in the future, if you want to make adjustments to it, you can. It was created in an online platform, so it should be easily able to be adopted or adapted to your needs. But we can go to the next slide. And I'd like to thank the town also for providing the pictures for this for this strategic planning brochure. And I apologize, the clarity of it's not perfect, but the original documentation is basically camera ready art. So we compiled a vision through much effort, I think, and input from everyone, a vision, mission, and value proposition. So a vision is looking to inspire and motivate employees going forward. The mission's purpose is to kind of say where we are now and set a standard. And then value proposition is the value that La Plata brings to the community and to the area. So we can scroll down. And then core values, you can see the town came up with community, accountability, respect, and equity. Core values are the things that are never changing. Those are kind of the unwavering trademark of the town that no matter what changes, these items don't change. So the town, plans to continue to have community engagement and citizenship, accountability, respect, and equity. So we can go to the next slide. So on this slide, goals more or less state that the town wants results, and they want the town to be accountable to certain aspects. And so in naming the goals of the town, we looked at the key and concepts that we wanted to perform on, and then came up with our 5 goals. So that the 5 goals were good governance, operational excellence, economic prosperity, community identity, and public service readiness. In addition to these goals, the town has developed objectives and action items, and each goal can kind of be tied to a metric that the town can perform on, and can be specified and adjusted going forward. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this slide here shows what we did on the kind of external market portion of this study, and looking at where La Plata is staffed currently, and is it accurate? Do we have the right staffing for the amount of demand of a municipality the size of La Plata? And then we wanted to also project out, based on growth, what would staffing levels need to look like going forward. So when we looked to the external market, we want to make sure that we're reaching out to organizations that are similar, so that it's a valid comparison of organizations. So we looked at geographic proximity, using kind of La Plata as the center, and then these other organizations, and to see how similar they were. We looked at population density, similar service offerings. So the organizations that are listed here, majority of them have police and water services in addition to the other services that La Plata offers. We looked at cost of living, labor force participation rate, median household income, median household price, and unemployment rate. And we can slide down to the next slide in the deck. There we go. And what we did in looking at these organizations is we broke them into 2 separate groups. We looked at the current staffing, those organizations that are already similar in size to La Plata, and the range in size went from Charlestown, West Virginia, that was roughly about 6,000 population, to Havre de Grace, that had the largest in the current segment, which was about 13,500 population. And the median of that ended up being about the median of where La Plata is projected to be at the end of 2022. So we felt like that was a good group to compare current staffing to. And then with regards to future staffing level planning, we looked at organizations that we could project and anticipate what needs would be met for an organization or a community of those sizes. And the median for this group of organizations was around 22 to 23,000 population, which is what we project based on forthcoming slides, where La Plata will be in the next 5 or so years. So we can go to the next slide. And this section talks to community growth. So a few factors that we want to look at is historically what has been the growth rate of La Plata. If we look at the American Community Survey of 2020 and its results, and that's what the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses, the growth rate La Plata has historically seen for the last 10 years, that's from like basically 2010 to 2020, 2019, was 7.1%. In perspective to how the state is doing, the state's projection for the same period is about 4.2%. And then to take that a little bit further out, the national growth rate is about 0.7%. So La Plata is well in advance of both the national and the state growth averages. And that's historically, so that's not saying, you know, we're projecting out anything. However, if you were to look at that data and project it out, La Plata would be looking at doubling itself in the same time frame of that 5 to 7 years that we're looking at going forward. So the slide that we're looking at right now is from your Department of Planning or your Planning and Zoning Department. And this slide shows by year for the next 10 years or 11 years, the number of dwelling units that the town is expected to have based on existing communities. So these are communities that you know you have developers for, they know their lots and plan sizes, and this is what we anticipate to see as far as permits being processed. And this shows it by year. If you were to average that, it would average to be about 680 units per year, year over year. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so this slide, what it does is basically takes the number of dwelling units by year and projects out population using 2.62 residents per unit. If you look at the total dwelling units over the next 10, 11 years, you're looking at roughly 6,400 total dwelling units, which would translate to 16,841 additional residents to the town of La Plata. And if you look at that cumulatively on where you are currently, at the end of 2032, you're projected to be about 26,300 total population. So where you are now, plus that 16,800 brings you to 26,000 roughly. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, thank you. All right, perfect. Good. All righty. So what we did here, and we're kind of changing our perspective a little bit. We took of the current organizations that we compared La Plata to now, we took those 8 organizations, and by the way, if I didn't mention it earlier, I should. We had 100% participation. So if any of those organizations that we listed there gave us a response back on their staffing levels. So we had good response data. Normally in studies that anyone participates in, you'd expect 5 to 10% if you're doing good. We had 100% participation from these organizations. So we feel good about the data that this it brings forward to us. And from there, what we looked at is by job title, the number of staff that was employed there at La Plata now versus the 50th percentile of the respondents. So 50th percentile of the market, what that means is that of the 8 respondents, 4 of them were above this number, 4 of them were below this number. And so you can see here, and it's just taking a screenshot of a brief part of the report, but it's showing, that they're pretty close. You're pretty close for the job titles listed here on where you are staffed. Then below that, those same job titles are shown using the projection group, or the future casting group, if you will. So you can see the job titles there. Now we're looking at, okay, here's where we see those other organizations having more employees in those positions than where La Plata is currently. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So using and summarizing all of your existing job titles, so not creating any new job titles, your existing job titles, and what La Plata would look at based on the market. I'm sorry, I'm backing up. This is looking at just current compared to the market from those 8 comparators from Charlestown, West Virginia to Havre de Grace, Maryland. This is the median. The median of those organizations had 15.83 additional employees than where La Plata is now. And then we looked at, well, what other jobs would we possibly want to consider the town looking at or adopting in order to handle this additional infrastructure, handle the additional responsibilities. And there we came up with an additional 6.5 jobs with new job titles. And then doing on the right-hand side of the screen, that in a side-by-side, the second column in shows where your staffing is now. You have 73.3 total full-time equivalent employees. If you were to just keep your existing jobs or job titles and add what the market median is, you would add an additional 15.83 full-time equivalents. If you increase to adopting the new job titles, you would have an additional 6.5, yielding 22.33 total new positions there at the town of La Plata. And that's looking at your current size of where you are now, and that incorporates, the smaller organizations like Charlestown to an organization the size of Havre de Grace. And their median comes out to be the size of La Plata. So we feel like this data is pretty strong in what it tells us. So we can go to the next slide, if you will. Thank you. Okay, so this here, this slide, we're looking at future staffing and market comparison and using pretty much that same kind of concept and looking at those larger set of 8 organizations and the number of staff they have in these same type of roles in their organizations. You can see in the I guess snippet on the right hand side of the screen, it shows where La Plata is currently, and then an increase in existing job titles, and then if you were to add new job titles, and that is broken out by department. So you can see that keeping just your current job titles, you'd have 127 positions roughly. Adding additional job titles, and they're listed in that bottom left-hand slide, you would add 31 positions for a total of 158 positions. And we talked to in a future slide how you step kind of or walk into that type of progression to get to that staffing size. And then we also allow you the ability to kind of use that on a sliding scale if you need to. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so what this slide tells us is the forecast of staff growth department year by year. So if you look at this year, this breaks out by department, the number of staff that you would need in order to be at the median of the comparators. And the most noticeable department is water, sewer, stormwater. And one thing I wanted to bring to the attention was your facilities position and your custodian. That right now you have contracted out, and that's perfectly fine. So that 2.2 number or count, if you're contracting out that work, that's just a choice in management style that the town is adopting, and that's perfectly fine. So you can kind of see in 2022 where that brings us. And then each year it shows what the growth would need to be by department to get us to that 158 total additional positions. One thing of note, again, back to that facilities position, here you can see that the market respondents didn't grow in that position. So what it tells me is that they're doing something else. So they're either calling that position something else or they're probably contracting that position out. But you can see by 2027, the heavy hitters on by department are police, public works, and water, sewer, stormwater. And if we could go to the next slide, if you would. So this just gives a graph showing, a bar chart basically showing by department what that looks like visually. And you can see how that kind of maps out visually. So next slide. Okay. So this shows by year, by department, your total number of employees, including both your existing staff and additional staff. And basically where I'm saying that you can kind of map out how this projects, if you notice there's a lag in the number of dwelling units that actually are permitted, then you can kind of slow down the scale a little bit. But it is intended to be kind of a sliding scale to go hand in hand with demand of dwelling units to allow you to project growth by department. And we can provide that data by job title as well. So next slide, if you would. So on the strategic planning recommendations, we hope that you like the marketing piece that we provided to you in hopes of keeping strategic planning up to date with trends and impacts of outside sources, to have ongoing monthly meetings to discuss strategic planning, a quarterly meeting 4 times a year, obviously, and then an annual meeting each year with a retreat every 3 to 5 years to discuss strategic planning going forward and how to modify that. And one indicator possibly of need for additional staffing is looking at your overtime hours, and overtime is projecting up year over year at La Plata, consistently and significantly over each year. So there's a trend line there that you can see that it does increase and increase year over year. So next slide. On staffing levels, so our recommendation would be to try to bring La Plata up to the median of the market. Again, that's not telling us that you're trying to be market leaders per se, nor do you want to be the lagger of it, but you do want to be, consistent with what market is offering. So I would say at the very minimum, bring in those additional 15 to 16 full-time equivalents to existing job titles. And then it does make a lot of sense, especially for a position or positions in an HR role, to bring those positions up fairly quickly, to kind of bring those centralized positions in to support that kind of growth and give you the ability to onboard and recruit to scale like we're projecting. And then and one thing that the town should understand is the need to anticipate for its pretty rapid growth over the next 10 years, and make sure that the staff is there to meet demands of your community. And that would mean 127 additional staff. And then if you wanted to bring on those additional 31 new job titles, and those consist of things like community service officer, additional planning positions, HR positions, economic development. So those types of job titles in there. Let's see. We hope that you adopt the staff growth forecasting model that we've given you so you can understand more or less by department what that growth should look like and anticipate for that, and then incorporate findings from the classification and compensation study to kind of determine what the fiscal impact of all of that would mean when looking at budgeting. And so if we go to the next slide, please. So focus groups, where appropriate, if the council could read through that and you know, the leadership read through that, and where appropriate, try to say, employees, we heard you, we understand, and here's what we're prepared to do about it. Already, items that have been implemented are the ordering of additional hardware, such as iPads, additional time budgeted for tech support for staff, additional faxing capabilities and training on faxing, and hard copies of the newsletter as per the request of employees to be able to see that kind of at the work site so they can keep up to date on communications. So we can go to the next slide. All right, that brings us to a close. Thank you. I appreciate all of your help, and I want to say thank you to the project team in particular. So thank you.
Okay, wow. So that's a lot of information to digest, and you did such a beautiful job. So thank you so much for that. I have to admit, I knew that we needed more employees. I did not know to what extent. And when you're recommending 15.83 full-time employees with new positions, that's interesting. And I appreciate all of your hard work on that. I'm sure there are a lot of questions, so I'm going to open this up to our great council. Does council have any questions for Karen tonight? Don't make me a liar, because I know y'all have questions. All right, Councilman Trollinger.
Sure. I'll start. I'm sure others will have plenty, and I might have a couple more as we go, but thank you for the presentation. It's pretty eye-opening. One thing I would ask, are we able to get kind of the raw data prior to your calculations as to the mean? So for example, Mount Airy, very similar in size right now. Are we able to take a look kind of at a comparison by municipality from the responses that you got? Not to say that invalidates anything. It's just helpful for us to see kind of some of our sister towns and locations, what they have versus what we're hoping to have, or where we're behind.
I'm trying to think if there were any organizations that didn't want the data to be known, even though it's, you know, publicly available data. It's not data that's necessarily easy to put your hands on. And even though they say it's publicly available, it really takes some research on their parts to bring together. And I don't recall that any of them had any objection to that. And we certainly do have, you know, all of the data in an Excel spreadsheet. We worked with the project team to be sure that PayPoint HR was mapping positions accurately to the roles there. And, you know, looking at job descriptions and job summaries to make sure that the responding organizations, when they said they had a position, that it mapped directly to a position there at La Plata. So I have no objection in sharing that information. So I'm happy to provide that.
Okay, thank you. Also, I was looking back, and I'm kind of working from our agenda packet, so I don't know exactly the slide. I mean, I'll call out the title of the slide, but just looking at the bar graphs from annual expected dwelling units and some of the accompanying data, I am confused about kind of, maybe you can just explain it to me because I might have just misunderstood. We've got, it looks like sharp increase, very sharp, let's say within the next 6 years on this bar graph as to dwelling units. We're talking about residences, right? Just normal language, but homes. And then we've got a sharp decline. Is this indicating growth or total units?
Okay, so this is indicating total units by, I'm sorry, this is just growth of units.
Okay.
This is
So
not.
it's not that in 2032, nobody's going to live in La Plata compared to 2028.
Correct. No, this is just the growth. But probably where you're going with this and how I wanted to go with this too is that looking at this visually, I mean, it looks like a pretty good curve, right? It looks like a pretty nice bell curve. And so my knee-jerk reaction was to say, well, you're going to hit, you know, a cap there looking like around, you know, between 2025 and 2028. But then you drop down. So where really does it make sense to, you know, continue this ramp up, or will this ramp up go beyond, you know, 2028? And I was kind of policed by my business partner, who is a PhD in mechanical engineering, who feels that the data beyond 2028 is really hard to project. Every year that you go out, there's an additional risk of error. And it's looking at your existing communities, and you know, those communities being being constructed and then, you know, maximizing and then closing down, right? So it's not looking at the possibility of annexing additional locations. It's not looking at the possibility of rezoning or you know, new developers coming in. So it's not as easy to say that you're going to peak and then it's going to drop back down. But to answer your question, this is new growth, new construction, not existing included in this number at all.
Okay, so, okay, that's really helpful. And of course, the accompanying slide kind of encapsulates it really well. I think the next slide with the side-by-side projected, you know, we see the way you've said it. And I guess you would still say on this slide, 2028 beyond, now it's almost negligible compared to the growth that we're seeing in the interim, but you're saying that may not be as accurate as the prior numbers, right?
So what we're saying is that every year that you go out from where we are right now, the room for error expands.
Gotcha.
So what gives us confidence in projecting out positions out to 27 and 28 is the fact that the median of the 8 respondents populations were about 22,000, which gets us right in between, kind of puts us in your fiscal year in that. So we feel confident to say, okay, we can project that far out fairly well. But beyond that, you know, just as there's a risk of the housing permits going down, there's also almost an equal risk of it going up still.
Okay, understood. Follow-up question on some of the staffing needs that you took a look at in comparison, not necessarily the amount of jobs that we're deficient in potentially now, or the amount of jobs that we'll need to have taken care of to best serve our residents, but as to the types of those slots. We've got categories of administration, legislative, finance, planning, police, public works, etc. This is kind of the micro versus the macro. In what you examined from the data, one of the things that has come up, I think, among our current council and staff is, you know, there's specific needs within administrative that we've got a lot of people that are handling a lot of different things. And I think your survey kind of indicated that they're taxed in a way, asking to do a lot of different types of jobs. Is there any further breakdown beyond the broad category that administrative or finance that we can kind of further discuss, maybe what our top priorities are short term? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So if you want to, if whoever's holding the slide can go back up to the slide where we look at your current, or either one, the current or the future. No, we need to go down. Let me see what slide number it is. So slide 21 might be a good start. Okay, So here we have it listed out by job title. So not surprisingly, there's only one town manager in all of the respondents, but we do have that data by job title. So I don't know if that answers your question. So you can see by job title, and then it lists in the far left column, their department that they fall into. But it says, by department. In here, one job title you might question would be accounting clerk. Is that someone who does accounts payable, or is that someone who does accounts receivable? Or are they doing utility billing? And in an organization like La Plata, like you said, and we said in the report, it's a fluid day-to-day kind of thing of where the demand is for staff. But staff enjoyed kind of having that, the ability to take on new challenges, and they were up for challenges like that. But does that answer your question as far as by job title, looking at the number of positions? So you can see, let's see, if you're looking at the future analysis, it says you're currently at 2 accounting clerks, and we expect that you'll need an additional 4.5 clerks by 2027, in that range. So that's kind of talking to that. I don't know, am I answering your question okay?
I think so. I think part of this is probably discussion with Mr. Manuel and Kevin as to what, and Mr. Greenville, as to what, what we can project out and what best needs the town. But to that, I think those are all the questions that I have right now. But this is really helpful. This is a massive, massive amount of concerning information that we got a lot to do. So thank you so much.
Hi. Councilman Goldsmith.
Yes, a lot of information. I want to make sure I'm actually understanding it properly. This is all based upon comparisons to other entities and not extrapolation based upon population growth. And I'm saying that particularly for the 2 largest departments, which is the police department and public works. At one time, there was a figure offered out there for every 350 new people you got into the town or the county, you needed another police officer. Did that come into play at all, or is it strictly based upon existing entities that you compared against?
Sure. So it was based on existing entities that we compared against, and assuming that they're meeting kind of the same criteria that La Plata is, that Maryland's population isn't that greatly different from one town over to the next, but it is based on population. And going into the study, I think it was asked particularly of police, were we going to look at crime statistics and things like that? And what we wanted to do, and the approach to this was looking at all departments the same for the entire organization. So not looking at one department a different way than looking at the other. So this kind of gives an overarching picture. And then you could look at, if you wanted to, but this study did not, the organizations that we utilized to compare La Plata to, you could look at their crime statistics as compared to La Plata, but we didn't go to that depth. But, having the city of Annapolis in there, having Havre de Grace in there, that they'd be, it would, I think that the population overall, the information is strong.
Yeah. Did you look at all into contracted services as far as an alternative to actually hiring people? Do other entities do that, or is it all strictly employees of the entity?
So very good question. So with regards to some entities, and when you see the raw data, you'll be able to kind of see the respondents and how the data came to be. But there certainly are the opportunity for some organizations to contract out. Areas would be like technology, legal, what else? Some facilities work, maybe sanitation and things like that. And the discussion, employees were candid in their discussions and focus groups. You could contract out sanitation. However, if you were to do that, your customer service would probably suffer because that is kind of a high touch for your community and communities in general, and something that is residents are very vocal if they don't get the customer service they kind of expect or have been accustomed to expecting.
Thank you.
All right. Any other council questions? Councilman Jenkins? Oh, you're muted, Dave. You're still muted.
Again, the wrong button. Sorry.
There you go.
Councilmember Jenkins from Ward 4. Again, thank you very much. This is, I think as somebody said earlier, a massive study with a lot of good data. So thank you very much. I was particularly interested and I thought it was a lot of good comments in the focus groups. That was very helpful. And this is probably a question we can't answer tonight, but it's probably one over the world. So what are our next steps? I mean, what's the next step in the process? I think you did mention under the strategic plan that the action and the action plan for the goals, there will be metrics developed for that so we can measure it.
Mm-hmm. So my recommendation for you is we, touched on metrics that the project team and department heads kind of felt confident in, but each department probably should look at each of the goals and how it impacts them and how they feel they can contribute towards meeting that goal. And then what that allows the department heads to do is then hold their employees accountable. So I would suggest where we ended up with our goals and objectives and action items as a very good first step, but I think that it can be homed in on further. So, it can work back and something that the employees mentioned in focus groups is they really, and this is interesting from my perspective to hear, they really valued the performance evaluations and it missed that. And so what the town can do using the data that we have a really strong start on is tying that back to employees' performance evaluations and how they contribute to the overall big picture. And I think when I talk to other organizations, that's something that they're missing that I think La Plata already has a head start on.
Oh, that's positive news. And but I was also thinking about in the future, being able to use those metrics to measure our progress as as a town, and then be able to have some kind of an annual report or a way to track that over time. So,
right.
But
so that can change, just like So your technology goes hand in hand with how well and how timely you can do those metrics. So you just want to make sure that that's lining up, and so that that's actually doable for tracking.
Okay, and then would this entail at some future point reorganizing departments and then how do you change job titles?
Sure. At some point, I would see the need to have, initially we have human resources under finance because I think that things like cost of benefits and risk and hiring, I think those are good. Finance is a good place to put that under right now. But at some point it may mean that it needs its own department. Same with economic development or community development. So at some point, yes, that organizational chart will need to change. On the positions that we saw other entities have that La Plata does not have, we did put them under a department for now. So for example, the human resources positions, we place those under finance for now. So we have a short-term map as to where that would go, but once you grow, it may make sense to look at that again. But we did assign department, an existing department for each of those positions. Except for economic development, I think we allowed that to be its standalone.
And then just one final, I guess, one over the world question is, how do we pay for all this as we move forward? And I guess we'll get into that in the near future. So
Right.
again, thank you very much for the effort. This is a great start for us. Thank you.
Yeah, but the advantage you do have is you'll have real-time information on permits and processing of that, which hopefully will mean additional revenues as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, well, it's just blowing my mind that we are at 73 employees and may need to go to 158, which is great because we're growing, but wow, I didn't think we were that far off. I thought onesies, twosies, so that is, and I see the increase over time, and 15 in 1 year is a lot, but if that's what we need, by golly, that's what we're going to get. So I look forward to seeing how the comp study is as far as pay. Sure. And see how that works out. But you did an amazing job with that, a lot of information, and it gives us a good blueprint for moving forward. So thank you so much for that.
Sure, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Council, if you haven't digested that, next we're going on to the proposed changes for Chapter 75 with Director Harrington.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. For the DRB request for an amendment to Chapter 75, I wanted to bring this to Council for a consensus before I undertook any changes or proposed revisions to Chapter 175, which is our building code. So after a meeting on January 12th of 2022, we had discussed amended design guidelines with the Design Review Board. And under section B5 of the attached guidelines, it's also located on page 17, the board had agreed to requiring certain materials. One in particular was vinyl siding, that they should have a minimum thickness of 0.44 inches to enforce our durable materials guideline. The 2018 International Building Code, which we did adopt under Ordinance 21-18, has minimum thickness requirements, which are less than 0.044 inches. The guidelines, since it's not a code or a legal document, does not have precedence, and so we would not have any ability to enforce the guidelines as written. We'd also have to ensure that a Plan Check, who's our third-party contractor for permit review and inspections, they would have to have an amendment to the code in order to review and inspect to ensure compliance with that minimum thickness. So that would in turn require a revision to Chapter 75 to make an exception to certain tables under the International Building Code for requiring building materials. So staff had reached out to Plan Check, and we also received a couple of comments during the Design Review Board meeting. I included the 2 comments that we received during the meeting in the chat, talking about requiring, these thicker materials could be more expensive for businesses who are looking to do revisions to their buildings. And that materials, especially in today's atmosphere with the pandemic, are not readily available and may require custom manufacturing due to the proposed changes to the code. And then I sent the information to Plan Check to receive their input on the minimum thickness. And so I'll read this out. That Plan Check stated that while the authority having jurisdiction, Town of Oplata can make modifications to the model codes, provided the modifications do not reduce the minimum requirements required by the model codes, certain items come to mind when it involves building materials. We are definitely experiencing a supply chain reduction of building materials, trade materials, and appliances across the board. Therefore, if basic code compliant materials are in short supply, any upgrade would likely experience further manufacturing and shipment delays. The time period that the council wishes to begin applying a specification alteration should be considered while we are in the current state. If the proposed changes are made, design professionals will need this information as soon as possible. By requiring upgraded materials, this will affect bid costs as well as locating material samples for their clients. Additionally, many design professionals apply a clause within their design documents and bid packages to allow for material alternatives. This is fine, but if a more dense siding or roofing material is not available and a less dense code compliant per the IBC, which he's referencing, material is available, it may be substituted. Therefore, it would become non-compliant. If the proposed changes are made, part of the plan review will be requiring a new required thickness of materials to be provided on the documents and possibly the brand names of the products so specifications can be verified online. In closing, Plan Check will support and enforce any code modifications the council wishes to make. So staff does understand the request from the Design Review Board, but notes that this could have a significant impact upon our development community at the current time. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions and to hear your thoughts on the proposal.
Thank you very much, Director Harrington, for a very thorough report on something that I don't know if many of us think about, but I know the Design Review Board found it important, and I'm very glad that you brought it to our attention. With that said, I'm going to open questions, comments to the council before I continue. Do we have any, let us know what you feel about this. Council? Councilman Jenkins. Oh, you are muted. You are just having a time, aren't you?
Pardon
there
me?
You go.
Wow, been a long day. Councilmember Jenkins, Ward 4. Is there any, Director Harrington, is there any impact on the fire code if it's a slightly different thickness?
That I do not have a good answer for you at this time. I was mainly looking at the International Building Code and not the National Fire Protection Code. I'm sure that there is some overlap due to insulation requirements with materials, but I don't have the answer right now, but I can certainly look into that.
Thank you.
Councilman Goldsmith.
Yes. A key thing I think that we're looking at here is this is the code. This is the desired thing we'd like to have. There's always exceptions, and we've been granting exceptions throughout our history. The discussion aspect of it was that if you use the thinner vinyl and it's cold, something hits against it, it creates a crack or a hole, and therefore deteriorates in the appearance of that building. And they wanted to make sure that we had a quality that would withstand that impact or other things happening to it. But again, you know, there's always exceptions. If the supply chain says you can't get it, then by all means, we can put an exception into it. But as a point, we might want to have this as our ideal. This is our goal, realizing the fact that there are other things impacting it, and then we would have to create the exception at that time.
All right, thank you for that. Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilwoman Bryant Ward, Ward 3. Director Harrington, so the current code allows for, if I'm understanding, 0.035 thickness. The Design Review Board is asking for 0.044. Tell me again the rationale for that. I mean, 0.034 is basically 0.04 and 0.044 is basically 0.04. What is the rationale?
So when you look at building materials, there are certain grades, and of course, different materials are weighted differently. So roofing material and metals may be based on gauges. Vinyl siding is generally based on thickness in inches. So the 0.035 is one level, and then the 0.044 is the next level up when you look at the building material grades. So that would just be one step up from the minimum that's allowed by the International Building Code.
But I'm trying to understand the rationale, because I'm numbers. So 0.035 to me is 0.04, 0.044, and I know that it's a grade up, but it's still 0.04. I can't imagine that is that significant of a difference. So I'm trying to understand the rationale for the recommendation. That's what I'm not understanding. I know I understand the level up, got it, but what's the rationale?
I do not have a response for that. Councilman Goldsmith, do you?
Yes, I would like to respond to that. And that is a level of quality. And as I mentioned, the fact, how more resistant it is to damage of any type. You take a look at your home, your weed eater hits your home at the bottom there, you're cutting into your vinyl. Because if that's it's the level 2, let's call it that way. I don't know how they're grading it, whatnot. Whereas if you go to the next higher grade, you're getting a much thicker and stronger product. And therefore, if something does hit against it, it has less chance of actually damaging it, and therefore creating deterioration of the facade of the building itself. That's the whole thing. It'll hold up better, stronger, and therefore is able to withstand things hitting against it.
So Councilman Goldsmith, I'm still confused. I'm sorry. How much sturdier can 0.044 be than 0.035? How much? Actually, you said much sturdier.
Much sturdier, much sturdier. If you talk to builders and construction and such, it is much sturdier product. Now, grant you, there is a cost differential as well. But as I just stated earlier, and with people concerned about supply issues, supply chain, and if they're coming in and this is what's the only thing that's stopping them from being able to do their project, by all means, we allow the planning director to make an exception to it because to allow the project to go on. It's not what we want, but because of the circumstances, we'll grant that waiver.
Councilman Goldsmith, this is my last comment. I'm going to have to come and see you, and you're going to have to show me the difference in 0.035 and 0.044. That's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You are welcome. Well, and here's my take on this. Is it our job to dictate the building? And we're aesthetics. And I think about if I am building a home where I live and I want thicker, sturdier, because I have boys that will weed whack, and we've been popped before, then I think it's upon myself and my husband to take that and say, okay, instead of the 0.35, we would like to go 0.44. That's an upgrade. But as Director Harrington said, the cost, and everyone has agreed, there is a cost increase to that. If we, and Councilman Goldsmith, you said that, we'd make an exception if we say 0.44 and there's a supply chain issue, then we could go to the 0.35. Well, I would always have a supply issue because I'm cheap. And I would say I've got a supply issue. I think that we, in my opinion, that when Director Harrington is talking to the builders, that we totally encourage a 0.44, and because of all the sturdiness. But to go against what the 2018 code says, and I'm not sure what, have you taken a peek at 2021? Has it been published? Do they change the thickness recommendation?
I don't believe they have. I don't believe they changed the minimum thickness requirements.
Yeah, to me, I think that we're entering territory that we may want to encourage thickness, but it's not going to change the aesthetics. except when it's popped, and then when it's popped, you get them for not being in compliance. And you tell them some things, you need to fix it. And do you do it on Heritage Green with the 3,170 homes, which is it only for commercial?
This only applies to commercial based on the design guidelines. And
the aesthetics are not different. I can't go up and say, oh, look at that. I'm shopping there because that's 0.44 versus 0.35. You can't tell the difference, can you?
Visually, no.
Okay.
From my personal experience, when I looked at the pictures and I looked at the, the standard grades that they had online, you can't visually tell the difference. It would come into play with the building permit review and seeing what they're actually putting on there as far as the number is concerned, and verifying that they've put that material on during the inspection phase.
Yeah, and go ahead, Councilman Goldsmith.
You can tell the difference to a certain extent. You got to look at some of these townhouses we have over here, and if you've had a lot of heat that's hitting against that side of the building, you'll see the wavy action into the vinyl on that side of the building. And so the key thing is, and it's strictly for commercial, it's not for private residents. So people who are cheap, if you want to be cheap, you can put the cheaper vinyl on.
Well, there you go. I see Director Stahl has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment back, and I certainly understand Councilwoman Bryant Ward, but it was interesting that this actually came up today as far as water piping is concerned for Heritage Green. We allow for C900 pipe for water pipe. We can either use ductile iron or we can use PVC, which is called C900, is the thick wall pipe that we would use for pressure water piping. Within the C900 grade, there's what they call the diameter ratio. They have DR14 pipe versus DR18 pipe. Interestingly enough, the difference in the diameter is 0.04 of an inch in the actual outside the outside wall thickness. It's a very, very minute difference. But the pressure rating of that pipe, in that 0.04 of an inch difference in that outside rating, the DR18 pipe is actually rated at 200 PSI. The DR14 pipe, which is the thicker walled pipe, is actually rated at 300 PSI. So even though it's a minute difference, there's a considerable pressure rating. And we're looking at this as far as being able to get the pipe, but I'm working with Reliable Contracting is the contractor up there getting ready to put this water pipe in. And just that little bit of difference did make a significant difference in the pressure rating of the pipe. So of course, the town's preference is to use the DR14 pipe that has the higher pressure rating, even though it's not even close. Our highest pressure in town is about 70 PSI. We actually test the pipe to 150, but both pipes are rated higher than that. We're asking for the higher pressure rating pipe, which has the thicker wall. But interestingly enough, the difference is only 0.04 of an inch. So I just wanted to point that out. Sorry.
Well, you got it off your chest, so thank you for that.
Well, and
all right. I knew it was coming. Councilwoman Bryant Ward, I saw your hand up. You put it down. Say it. Gotta say it.
Director Stahl, but you're talking about a totally different use. I mean, I can imagine, and we look at the damage that we've had with pipes, just underground. I would support that. But you're talking about vinyl siding, and somebody may be cracking it with a whatever. Most commercial buildings don't even have grass close to their buildings. They have a little bit of something, and they ain't gonna be weed whacking it. I mean, I'm just trying to understand the impact that having, and it's not 0.4 and 0.35, it's .044 and .035. What difference, what is the impact of having that change on the building in our town? That's all I'm trying to understand. And Director and Councilman Goldsmith, I totally get it. I've seen those, the town, not the townhomes, but the actual homes over off of Leonardtown Road across from that high school. That the siding has warped like that, and it's so ugly. I would be cutting up and having a fit. But what is the impact that making this change and putting this burden on our existing businesses in the town gonna have? What will it do for us?
Could I?
Not your Director Stahl.
I'm sorry. I thought that was direct.
It is strictly, in my mind, a visual thing, and also a long-term maintenance issue as well. You know, you're looking at these things, they're going to last. You want them to last 30, 40, 50 years. And will they hold up that well? The stronger product will hold up a lot better than the thinner product. Now, grant you, the townhouses and such are not controlled by this instruction, by this ordinance here. It is strictly commercial. And so and that's what the discussion was in the DRB. It's probably not a critical factor, but it's something, if we're looking at the long term, updating our ordinances, that's something maybe we want, with the idea, the capability to provide exceptions.
Okay, one last question. I assure you this is my last question. Prior to the International Building Code of 2018, what was the requirement? Because we've got some businesses that have been in town for a long time. What was the requirement?
I'm sure it's probably the same as it is now. It hasn't probably changed, has it, Janine?
Not that I can think of. I can find out really quickly. Because we were under the 2012 International Building Code previously.
And let me ask another question, Janine, then. Are you aware of any construction that has taken place over the last 10 plus years in which it did have vinyl siding that has deteriorated, which doesn't look as good today as it did when it started out?
I don't have any examples offhand. I do know that we have a requirement under our code that if your materials have degraded or if they're cracked or, you know, need maintenance of whatsoever, that needs to be maintained. So we do have code enforcement that goes around, and if there are any damage, you know, citing those types of things, we do bring that up and have them correct that issue. Same thing goes for signage and other items in the town.
So if we had the capability to enforce the capability of them correcting a problem that has happened, then maybe we're okay.
That's what I would go on that, because we do have the ability to do that. And if there is a rogue weed whacker that has maybe, you know, damaged a piece of property, then that is and they're not fixing it, that is something that we can fall back on. But the cost of, and as you well know, the cost of things like lumber that's going up and everything else, add that one more burden. And then really, when you think about it, it would be the planning department, who is overtasked anyways, granting waivers left and right. And Jim, you and I both have a problem with waivers, don't we? And so I don't want to see a waiver if I don't apply. You know, when you apply, you know what you're applying for. So with that said, I am not in favor of our great planning department moving forward with this and spending time on this, when I think there's other things that you could devote your time on. Councilman Goldsmith, what do you say?
I will support what your recommendation is. I'm not that hard over on.
Councilman Trollinger?
Sorry there, trying to get unmuted. I don't think we need to change it. We have an aesthetic provision in our code where we can check up on people and make sure that it doesn't get degenerated to the point where it's ugly. So they've got enough on their plates, our business community. So I'm not in favor of forcing them onto this. Thanks.
Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
Heck no.
All right, that was well said. And Councilman Jenkins.
I finally got the mute button right this time, so thanks. Councilman Jenkins from Ward 4. I'm not in favor of this. I mean, I certainly understand the discussion, but I think due to the supply chain issues and the extra costs, that to me overwhelms the need to do this. Thank you.
Great. All right, so you've got your consensus right there. So we will live to fight another day on something else. So we'll go on. Since I've got you here, how about we talk about school seat allocations?
Yes. So again, for the director, or for the record, Janine Harrington, Director of Planning. So I did a overview of the current status of the town's school seat allocation situation. We've discussed this a couple times last year, noting that with the potential for the significant increase in the number of building permits that we see over the next few years, that we really need to make sure that we are following our school seat allocation policy and keeping up with the current status of our developments. So during the past few months, staff has been working with the Board of Education and Charles County government to look at the anticipated school rated capacity within the school system. I did attach the 2021 official enrollment capacity report that was completed in September. That was forwarded to me by Charles County. And then based on that information and then looking towards the future and projecting how many school seat allocations we're going to need versus how many we are going to actually allocate, I wanted to bring you up on the current status, where we currently have 5 active developments that have received final plat approval or major site plan approval. And in total, they would require 108.4 school seat allocations for the FY22 fiscal year. There are 3 developments that have not yet obtained the final approval, and those have a total of 51.6 school seat allocations. I've attached the updated capacity projection spreadsheet, as well as the draft school seat allocation tracking spreadsheet for your reference. In the first part of FY22, so that began on July 1st of last year, the town has issued 10 residential building permits with a total of 4.66 school seat allocations. Since January 1st of this year, 2022, we've issued 8 residential building permits with a total of 3.8 school seat allocations. So if we're using the minimum school seat allocation allowance under the town code, which is the minimum of 100, we would have 91.54 school seat allocations remaining for FY 2022. In summary, if we have taking a look at the active developments, the 5 active developments that we have right now, we would be short 16.86 school seat allocations if all of the developments with approvals wanted to proceed forward with permit submissions during this last half of the year. As noted in the table below, building permit projections will be steadily increasing over the next few years based on information that I've received from the developers. And a lot of this is projections. It is subject to change. Anybody can say, yes, I'm going to build 100 homes in a year, but in reality, that may not actually happen. So it's kind of just take it as the projection at the time, and it is subject to change. And then I'll also note again that Heritage Green is subject to a development rights and responsibilities agreement. So when you look at the capacity projection spreadsheet, there are a lot of those homes that are coming from Heritage Green, but they are going to be buying school seat allocations directly from Charles County government. So over the next 2 to 3 years at least, they should have enough school seat allocations from Charles County government directly as to not impact the town's school seat allocation availability. Eventually, they're going to hit their apartment section across Roswick Road that they most likely will need to get some allocations from the town in order to build all of those units. So moving forward, the council will need to consider the total number of dwelling units proposed and the number of school seat allocations that will be made available. If there are not enough school seat allocations, developments may not be approved by the Planning Commission, or in the instances for these developments, I cannot issue a building permit if a school seat allocation is not available. So staff is requesting that the town council determine the number of school seats the town will make available for new residential construction during the remainder of FY22. This is within the town's code, as it were. Staff should come to the council in January of each year to determine if there's any excess of school seats that can be issued for that remaining of the fiscal year. And then projections will be updated and brought before the council in June to determine the number of school seat allocations that are available for the FY 2023 fiscal year. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that. Councilwoman Bryant Ward, you're up first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilwoman Bryant Ward, Ward 3. Director Harrington, does this, when we have the developments that are proposing to build schools, do the school seats come into play with those developments?
No.
Okay.
No, so that's where, and like I said, this is kind of a new thing that we're transitioning to, because in the past, we've never even come close to 100 school seat allocations. And so that's why I'm kind of at a delay with getting this information together, because I wanted to wait until the end of the calendar year of 2021 to see where we were actually at as far as how many residential building permits we've issued, where the different subdivisions are in the process, because obviously Agricopia, Steeplechase, a few of the others, they've already gotten the development approvals, the final plat approvals. Those plats have been recorded, and so they, can move forward at any time. And then just looking at new development and how that comes forward, I wanted to make sure I had all of that information very clear. But from my understanding, in talking with the county and with the Board of Education, that the actual building of a school does not have any impact on the initial school seat allocation policy or process, because those school seats won't become available until that is built. I've also been told that in order to build a new school, they have to have reached a certain amount of overcapacity in order to receive funding from the state. So there's a lot to this behind the scenes. I've been trying to pay attention to what the county is doing. And of course, with the county, they have their adequate public facilities ordinance in place, which we don't have yet. We do have our Chapter 173, which gives our school seat allocation policy. But because we're a municipality, we have no control over the schools or for any of the funding, the excise tax, any of that information. We kind of have our own way of going about doing our school seat allocations. So it's a little bit of a give and take when you're looking at this.
So even if, for example, the hub is proposing that private school, you don't consider that until that school is actually constructed.
Correct. So the same thing for Heritage Green. As part of their annexation agreement, they are required to build a school. At this point, it's posed to be an elementary school, but that didn't play any bearing whatsoever when we were doing the negotiations for the development rights and responsibilities agreement with the county.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Goldsmith.
Yes, Councilman Goldsmith, Ward 1. I've been kind of following the debate taking place with the county many years, not many years, but several years ago regarding school seat allocations, and that developer would get the allocation but never build to use the allocations. My understanding is they were pushing for the idea that you use it or you lose it. Is that the case now, or once they get them, they keep them until they finally get the buildings constructed? And for a while, when the economy was bad, it's not the same today as it was back like 5 years ago. So I guess the key point is, are we expecting any sympathy from the county to give us school seat allocations, or they're being more difficult with it?
I think that there's a political atmosphere beyond what my job role is on the school seat allocation side. What I'll say is that, under the county's adequate public facilities ordinance, if you don't have capacity at any one of the schools within the project district, you cannot issue building permits or issue school seat allocations for that project. Same thing happens for St. Mary's County. They had a moratorium on development in the northern part of the county for years. But of course, the town being a priority funding area, it is expected that you are going to have development, and it should be directed to the priority funding area for development. And under our, I'm sure Mayor Ekman would love to speak on this topic, because he actually wrote the agreement between the county and the town back in 2005. And the understanding from what he explained to me was that the reason why we put in the minimum of 100 school seat allocations per year was in order to pay for the debt service for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So now I think that there's a lot of, changing aspects to that. But that's still what our code says. We have a minimum of 100 school seat allocations per year. We do not have the limitations that the county has based on their adequate public facilities ordinance. We obviously need to be cognizant of capacity issues and not, making problems worse. But at the same time, the Board of Education and the county do receive taxes. They receive the school excise tax, and they receive funding to build new schools or to redistrict as needed. And I don't know if that's been really happening to the degree that it may need to in the next few years. So it's, like I said, there's a whole nother aspect to that that's a little bit beyond planning.
Thank you.
Mr. Manuel.
Just a point of clarification. I think it was stated that as part of the Heritage Green development, they would be building a school. They will be dedicating property for the construction of a school. And to clarify on the hub, if it's dedicated or if it's indicated that it's a private school, it would not fall into the equation because it would be private and not public.
Very good point.
Thank you for that. All right, Councilman Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilperson Jenkins, Councilmember Jenkins from Ward 4. Director Harrington, thanks a lot. This is a lot of work and very complicated, so we appreciate the information you brought, and it's not easy to digest per se. So could we develop a waiting list if they reach a certain, let's say for instance, we say 100 seats of allocation and we reach that, can we develop a waiting list until we have the available allocations?
Yes.
Because I think I remember that the county had at one time a waiting list or something. I'm not sure if they still do.
Yes, they do, and that's
Okay.
standard practice for school
Okay.
seat allocations.
And then, so what really are our options? We could say 100 units for the rest of, you're looking for recommendations for the rest of this fiscal year, which goes until next June 30th of this year.
Yes.
So
Either we stick to the 100 that
Okay.
is the minimum under the code. And like I said, it's a minimum. We could stick to that minimum of 100 school seat allocations, which would leave us 16.86 school seat allocations short. So there would be one of the projects that would be put on a waiting list until July
Okay.
1st hit, or you could
increase it.
the 108.46 or whatever it was,
Okay.
school seat allocations for the remainder of the year.
And I just, again, just a comment that your previous discussion about priority funding area, and that's where they want the growth to go, and therefore the infrastructure should be funded to support that. That's absolutely in total agreement with that. So thank you.
All right, Councilman Goldsmith, do you have your hand raised again or just not?
No,
lowered?
I didn't take it down.
All right. So, Director Harrington, I have, I guess, a question. So if it's a minimum of 100, why would council need to say we will do 108? And I am concerned about that because in an earlier meeting today, it was insinuated that when something doesn't go our way, we change a policy. And I kind of take exception to that, but this would fall, in my opinion, in that category, especially since the wording says a minimum of 100. So why would council need to say, okay, we do a minimum of 108 when the minimum's 100?
So you wouldn't be stating that the minimum is 108. What that is referring to, so by right, and that if I wasn't going over 100, we wouldn't be necessarily having the conversation in this manner. We would just be looking to do the 100 school seat allocations and create the development capacity list to update you on that. In the town code, and I'm very quickly trying to find this section in particular that brings this up. There we go. Under section 173-95, establishment of school seat allocation and allocation pools, you go down to letter C. In the fourth quarter of each fiscal year, the town council may reevaluate the number of school seats remaining unallocated in each pool and subpool. If the council determines that all of the school seats in any pool or subpool are not likely to be allocated before June 30th of that year, the council by resolution may reallocate such school seats into one or more pools or subpools where a demand for school seat allocation exists. So there's a few things in here. And then letter E says not later than January of each year, the chief executive officer shall consult with the Board of Education to determine whether any changes in school seat enrollment during the school year have resulted in additional available school capacity for that year. If the chief executive officer determines that additional capacity does exist, the chief executive officer shall also advise the town council. The town council by resolution may make such additions of school seat capacity to the respective allocation pools or subpools for that fiscal year as the council determines appropriate.
Okay, so I heard may, and that is one of the trigger words, I guess. We may not. And the other thing is, I guess, and I heard what you just said, and I understand what you just said, but I also understand a minimum of 100. And although that still kind of freaked me out on that, I guess I'm hung up, and I will be very transparent. I'm hung up on being accused of changing policy when it doesn't go my way, and I'm very conscientious about that. So, to me, I'm fine with a minimum of 100. But if it helps you, to go forward based on the May and what is written, then we give you an answer. So I'll throw it out to council again, and let me know what you guys feel on this so we can give Director Harrington some guidance. All right, Councilman Goldsmith.
Councilman Goldsmith, Ward 1. As it says, a minimum of 100. So I'm not sure if I see the need to have to change anything.
All right. Councilman Jenkins.
Thank you, Councilmember Jenkins, Ward 4. I didn't realize, Director Harrington, until you just read it off, that we have the ability to go back in the fourth fourth quarter of the year to kind of reevaluate, which is prudent thing to do. So I don't have any particular heartburn with staying at 100. And we can, because we always have the ability to go back and evaluate as conditions change, and they will change. So thank you.
Mr. Manuel.
Not to cloudy the subject, but Ms. Harrington, if you look at our development capacity analysis for, I guess we're looking at 21, is that correct? Which shows 112 units. I believe 34 of those units are dedicated to Hawthorne Green, which is 55 and over. And wouldn't they be exempt from the school seat allocation?
They are. And so the number on the development capacity analysis is based on calendar year.
Okay.
Whereas school seats are based on fiscal year for whatever reason. Could just to make my life, fun, figure those out. But that's why you'll see on the school seat tracking spreadsheet, I do not have Hawthorne Green listed within there, and any other projects that turn out to be senior living or senior capacity will be either removed or added as needed to the tracking list. So yes, those are not included in the calculations for the actual school seat allocations.
Thank you for clarifying.
Anyone else on that? All right, I was hoping. All right, Councilwoman Bryant Ward, what you got?
Director Harrington, I may be slow tonight, and it's I still have COVID brain. Tell me again the rationale for the 108.
So the 108 is purely based on existing and remaining units. So like I said, this was, don't feel bad. Brent can attest to this. I had a very difficult time wrapping my head around this school seat allocation. I struggled on how to set up the actual spreadsheet, how to figure out where we were at. Because like I said, up until, mid last year, we were still kind of moving forward with we weren't really keeping track of the school seat allocation approvals or how many school seats projects required. We were just issuing building permits and at the end of the year, tallying them up and sending them off with our annual report. So there was there's gonna be a little bit of an awkward period, which is going to be till the end of FY22, where we are, figuring out where we are and what we have approved. So that's the part of the issue here is that, we had ongoing subdivisions that I wasn't quite sure what the status was as far as school seat allocations were. When we looked at school seat allocations before, we were using the totals from the Charles County yield factors, whereas if you use the breakdown of the unit by elementary, middle, and high school and then add them together, you get a totally different number and it's actually better. So I relooked at everything, figured out where we were with the existing approved subdivisions and what we've recently approved by the Planning Commission to show that we would need 108.46 school seats for FY22 based on what we've already issued and what we already have approved and planned.
So when we have the opportunity to revisit this, and you say at the end of the year, is that the beginning of the next school year?
The next fiscal year. So, and I guess they kind of tie in together.
Yeah.
So that's why we'll bring this to you back in June to set the number of school seats that will be allocated for FY 2023. So like I said, you have a minimum of 100 that you can allocate, or you can go above that based on our current code.
Okay. So we're looking right now for school seats up until the end of this school year, which is around May, June. I think they get out of school now in June. And then we have an opportunity to revisit it in August.
We'll revisit it in June because that's when we'll set technically we'll set it for the fiscal year, which begins on July 1st. And so part of the problem is that we didn't set a number of, school seat allocations for FY 2022.
Mhm.
So we were just going forward.
Okay.
So that's where I'm saying that, generally we'd have a minimum of 100. We need 108.46. Is there issues with that?
Well, I'm just going to say I am in agreement to stay with the 100, and the reason being is that we're already in the current school year that's going to end in May or June, and then we can revisit this at the end of June for the next school year to start. Thank you for the explanation.
Very well.
Rest of the council, I've heard from two of you, a minimum of 100. I'm at 100. Any other comments? I see it. Do it, Councilman Trollinger. Just say it.
Director Harrington, I think you do a fantastic job, and I think, of course, you're not alone in. I mean, as you've communicated it, it's certainly helpful, and it's a abstract thing to kind of get our hands around, but
Yeah.
The concern is always balancing growth with infrastructure, and it seems like we have some mechanisms in place to make sure we are providing our residents what we need. So as long as we're able to revisit as we go, I support the current plan. So thanks so much for doing what you do.
Thank you.
All right. So current plan, it is.
Sounds good to me. I will update my spreadsheet to, take it back down to the basically there'll be 50 school seats in each of the pools. We only have 2 pools that are active right now. And then we'll just put a waiting list together, and there'll be maybe one building, that'll have to wait until after July 1st to proceed forward. And I've already discussed that with the applicants, so we can move forward with that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, and it brings us to our last item on the agenda is the protocol for a lowering of the municipal flag. Mr. Manuel, are you taking that, or Miss Michelle, Miss Minor, or am I? Who's going to be taking this? If not, I'll take it.
I'm sure I can walk everyone through but I know I think Kelly's our Madam Clerk tonight. I think she was the one that was probably most active in the development and research that went into this. I don't know, Kelly, if you're comfortable with walking the council through this.
You're muted. All right, nothing like throwing her out there under the bus. I'll take this because I did do a lot of research on this as well. We did not have anything on the books that directly says when our flag should be lowered. So I went to the website of the governor, and then I went and researched other municipalities. A lot of them don't have their own code. Or own protocol, I should say, that is on their books. Is this overkill? It could be, but it is also one that moving forward, we have a set of blueprints again that we can say, this is what we follow. Of course, as Jim and I always say, there's exceptions to every rule, but this is what we should be following, in my opinion. And staff did an amazing job of going through line by line with this and redlining things and adding things. And we tried to be very conscientious of every facet of why you would lower a municipal flag. As you well know, and I'll just say it for the public, as you well know, when the American flag, and the president is the only one who can lower the American flag, when the American flag is lowered, all of the flags are lowered, so that our municipal flag is lowered as well. When the state flag is lowered, our flag is lowered. But what if we would like to lower our flag. And you look at the following timeframes to be used for the lowering of the municipal flag. It would be for members right now serving as the mayor, the council, or town manager. It is also for former mayors, town managers, and council is another one. Town employees in performance of official duties or responsibilities. Active duty members, and going back to that one, that would include everyone. That would include the police in the line of fire. It would include workers that public works. If something catastrophic happens to them on the line of duty, that is a lowering of the municipal flag. And of course, any active duty members of the armed forces that have their primary residence in the town of La Plata. Presidential proclamations and governor proclamations. And what I think the ask is today from council is to look at that and see if there is anything else that needs to be added, edited, deleted, or if you have questions on that. So I will throw it out to you guys. Councilman Challenger.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Matt Challenger, Ward 2. So my question here is, you indicated that I think this is good work in kind of outlining the usual procedures here and designating the days for which the town sees as important to bring remembrance or to, awareness. But as to the lowering of the county flags, is there any indication as to what instruction there is there? Or are we silent on that? Because one of the concerns I have about this, just the way that it's structured, just putting my legal hat on, is there's no real wavering here. This just says this is when we do it. Of course, if there's a member of our community that passes that is special, right, to our town and our community, maybe as the county at large, we may choose to do something with the lowering of the flag. There doesn't seem to be a recognizance of that in this. I don't know if that's a phrase you put somewhere on the notice that, or as otherwise designated by mayor and town council or something like that. But, specifically I'm thinking about, community member that we honored earlier this year. I'm just seeing how that would play into something like this. Do you know what I mean?
I see what you're saying. So the municipal flag we have that is flown at, of course, Town Hall, Public Works, the train station. Right now, we don't have one at the police station, which I was surprised because there's only one flagpole. Those are the ones that, so we don't even fly. We're not in charge of the county flag at all. And on our, and Brent, correct me if I'm wrong on this, or Michelle. So when we have the county flag, we don't have jurisdiction, obviously, to fly to the county flag. But the whole thing, and I see what you're, yep.
Yeah, I'm not talking about us controlling the county flag. I'm talking about counties recognizing someone, we know if the state does, we may, the United States does, whatever. You see
so
what I mean?
When the county, because the county does recognize and lowers the flag quite often. And of course, they're 5 times our size. And that we do not have to follow that protocol to lower it. So if they lower it for, whomever, that is not, we do not have to lower that ours, because then you're lowering it for everyone. So that's where that is. And one of the thing is, it sets a precedence. So if we're lowering it for certain individuals, that's why we found it important to make sure that we don't run into a problem that my neighbor says this one did so much in the community and the municipal flag should be lowered. So it takes the politics out of it, because this is our policy. This is our protocol, I should say.
Okay. So
Does that
we're
help?
acknowledging that there is no recognizance but what's on this list, right? So we don't want to get into what you're saying is we don't want to recognize neighbor, because we would say, hey, look at this list. This is all that we do. Is that?
Yes. Yes, I see. Brent, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I think Councilman Trollinger explained maybe a little bit better that I understand now, but it almost sounded like he wanted to take into consideration, like, say, if someone unfortunately were to pass at the La Plata Fire Department and the county puts the flag at half-staff, then, or, you know, a local business leader from La Plata and the county puts their flag at half-staff, is there a piggyback provision that would also allow for the town to put our flag at half-staff if it was someone directly related to the town of La Plata?
And I think that we open ourselves up to a whole lot of scrutiny, and someone may not have the ability to come and say, could you lower the flag because my neighbor passed. Everybody has an importance, and we don't want to discriminate. And so we don't want to say this person is much more worthy than this person. So if we follow the elected officials and the town, because we work for the town, of course, business owners, residents, they contribute to our success, but we open ourselves up to a whole lot of, I think, headache and trouble if we open it up to everyone.
So we talked about there's an exception to every rule. There's no exception on here. I just want to make sure I understand. There are no exceptions as it's presented, right?
As it's presented, there are not. And Brent, correct me if I'm wrong on that. There are not. There was a phrase in there then that we spoke about that was at the town's discretion, but you open yourself up to discrimination on that one, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, and as an attorney, you may agree and you may disagree, but if we do it for one, and if I can think of a lot of people that would be so worthy, but that doesn't mean that's outwardly. That doesn't mean that others haven't silently contributed, and it starts a precedent. So that's what the last time we lowered our town flag, it wasn't council that lowered the town flag, and so we're starting off as council is the one that gives the direction, and when it is lowered to half mast, it will say mayor and town council versus the town. This is the discussion I want to have, because we need to see every avenue. Other council members. Nothing? All right, Councilman Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Jenkins, Ward 4. I have some of the mixed feelings about it, but I do think that we need some, not more strict, but just some guidance to follow. So we have a procedure that we follow. And as you, Mayor, and your family, and even Councilmember Goldsmith, you know, we're kind of military guys, so we understand that need. So I'm generally in favor of this kind of a protocol, and I think that's the appropriate word to use, protocol. Unfortunately, not to be disrespectful or criticize, but we can go down a path where we make an exception for everything. And then for me, it's just going to be chaos, or it's going to be very confusing. And I think somebody said earlier, I don't know whether Mayor you said or somebody, well, if we do, well, you did it for them, well, why not for them? So hopefully we can minimize that, or at all. Hopefully we can just minimize it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Trollinger.
Have there been requests on behalf of individuals that have passed to lower our municipal flag in the, like, let's say the last 3 years?
4
that
years?
we're concerned about?
No, but it does bring up the question. We have had at least one request, and we honored it. And it was, and so we, as in, and again, I'm not throwing our town manager under the bus whatsoever, but the town, the town lowered the flag. And of course, we had discussed that, but the town, it was published that the town of La Plata lowered the flag. When the county flag is lowered, it's always Commissioner President Ruben Collins does. And they lower it quite often. And because they're much larger. And you're only talking about right now 3 flags in our incorporated town limits that would be lowered. It's at Public Works. 2 of them are at Public Works, and I mean Public Works, the train station, and here.
So I guess that's part of my tension, right? Is that, you know, we're kind of elevating our municipal flag to the level that I think is a little bit, I don't know, it's interesting, right? Because we're a community of people and individuals. We have a small town. I know we're growing quite rapidly. I thought it was more than appropriate. I thought it was a fantastic gesture of our town to lower it in our most recent case that we did, because of the community impact that our resident or our business member had in the community. And I think, yes, you run the risk of excluding someone, but I think we need to have the opportunity to evaluate that, and you can do that on a case-by-case basis. It doesn't have to be a weekly thing. I mean, hopefully we don't have major pillars of our community that we're losing so often as to this being a problem. But I think our community is mature enough to understand that those that are making an impact, and that we can mourn as a community together and recognize them, just like the state does, just like the county does, on a basis that makes sense. I mean, to say that we don't want to honor people because everybody will want to be honored, when we don't have this overwhelming crisis of people saying, "Hey, Mayor, my babysitter's uncle's, cousin who stopped by La Plata, to dine at Marie's, they passed." Like, it's an important part of what we do, is connecting with our residents and our business community. And I think we should, as a unit, have the option of saying, no, this is important. We need to participate here. And it's a weird juxtaposition, right? If the county is able to do that for one of our residents or one of our business leaders or doctors or whoever it is in our community, but we're not allowing ourselves to have that same opportunity to honor or recognize in the way that the county would. That's all I'll say on it. But I appreciate the effort that you guys have all put in examining the protocol. There should be a protocol. I just think it's important to honor those in our community that are making an impact. They're not here for it, but it's good for our community to mourn together and to celebrate together. And that's all I'll say about that.
And Councilwoman Bryant Ward, before I go to you, I just want to do one, I guess, a little bit of a question for Councilman Trollinger. So would you suggest that it's at our discretion, or would you wait for the family to ask?
I think we should have our discretion on it. I don't think you want, I don't, I think in many situations, a family shouldn't have to ask. And I think that's part of the issue that I see, is that when you have a community member that makes such a strong impact, we should be honoring them rather than going through the requests such that I don't think that crisis exists. But I think that's my stance on it.
Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilwoman Bryant Ward, Ward 3. I do understand the significance of doing this, but I have concerns, and I do believe that if the flag is going to be lowered, it should be at the discretion of the mayor and council. While I don't believe in putting this in, putting this rigid document in place, I think that it should very well be, even if someone brings it to our attention, but we have criteria for when we will, again, significant members in our community, who have made a major contribution. And then that's subjective when you start adding terms like that. Contribution, who's to decide what a contribution is? We don't know, the lifestyle of everybody, so we could very well honor somebody who, is questionable. So I think that to put something like this in place would not do our town justice. And Councilman Jenkins, I do understand both my sons, my deceased husband, 26 years in long-term military people. So I do understand that, but I think that we should be asked, or if we are aware of someone who's made a significant contribution, then we make the determination as council, not the town staff. That would be my recommendation. I'm not in support of this document. While it's very well written, it makes perfect sense. I just think it opens us up to some significant scrutiny. And I mean, if it's in place now, long after we're gone, if it's still being utilized, it opens us up to scrutiny.
Okay. Councilman Goldsmith, do you have anything to add?
I see the value into it being definitive. I don't have any heartburn with it. I can go either way. I'm wishy-washy.
Thank you for that. I really see this as protecting us from discrimination, because someone says this person made a contribution to the town, and you don't know their back history. You don't know outwardly. They may have contributed. They may have done something that was fantastic. But if you know the other side of the story, and people know both sides of the story, I fear, and probably will never happen again, but I fear that we open ourselves up to scrutiny and to being discriminatory by saying, Sam, oh man, you know what? He brought in businesses, or he brought people to the town, but Sally, who volunteered at all of these places, what did she do for the town? I just see us opening ourselves up for a whole lot of scrutiny, and that's what this document is to avoid. Now, if the line that we originally had in gives you less of a heartache, that it says at the discretion of the town, the mayor and the town council, if that is what needs to be done, I still find it hard, because it leads us to saying this person contributed. How did they contribute? Do you know the whole story on their contribution, or is it just all smoke and mirror. I mean, and I'm not talking about anybody in particular, so please don't assume that I am. But if this person presents themselves as one person and is really maybe not so kind on the other side, then we are honoring someone we may not know that is very quiet and has helped whatever. I'm not even going to give an example because I don't want to single anybody out, but that's where I have a heartache. Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
So Madam Mayor, so let's just take a scenario here. Former La Plata mayor, council member, town manager. Say for whatever reason, Councilman Trolinger.
Good, pick on him tonight.
Due to the stress of his job, starts doing drugs and dies of a drug overdose. He's a former council member. Now, are you going to say, well, due to the, nature of his death, is that somebody we want to lower a flag for? Say he gets shot in a bank robbery. His business is not doing so well, and these are far-fetched, but it's possible. We do have people that have issues that we know nothing about. Are these people we want to lower a flag for?
And that's a great point. In fact, we just had, it was so sad, a mayor, an active mayor in Hyattsville committed suicide. We don't know what was going on in his world. He was the current mayor. He was serving. Does that mean because of the way he died, we don't lower the flag? Because many people don't support the idea of suicide. Obviously, something was very wrong, but it doesn't diminish the fact that he served. And military, you all know, 22, that's the number. 22 a day commit suicide. If we have an active duty member out and pick the town, pick the city, pick the country, and they don't die in the line of fire, but it is self-inflicted.
Right. So I didn't say suicide. I said drug overdose. So
I know, but that could be something. I don't know. I'm giving an example.
I don't want to touch that subject, because mental health is a major issue, but and I know drugs can be a major issue, but I'm saying something that is not morally acceptable,
But do we judge a person on the way they died or how they served?
I can't see.
And this is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I can't see myself lowering the flag for someone who gets shot up for robbing a bank or beats their wife and decide to commit suicide and kill their wife and their children. Those things happen. I can't see that. And that does open us up to being subjective versus objective. Yeah, I just feel that there are too many other issues here, and I think we have so many other things on our plate. I just don't see the.
Fair enough. Any other comments? Well, my suggestion would be, I guess, hearing. That would be, guys, you can't put me on a tiebreaker here. Hearing actually two that are not in favor of this and one that's a wishy-washy per his own words. And then one that's there. So, you know what, I will, I think that we put this on the back burner. I think we revisit it maybe later. And I would encourage council members to email Kelly or Brent, and after looking at this document, if there are words that you want to put in there, edits that you want to put in there, that you think that a certain word would make this document stronger, then this is our first look at this. And I just as I have stated already, I feel strongly that we should have something in place to protect us in the fact that we are not either granting every single one, and there haven't been requests, or excluding someone that we should have put in there. I think that it opens us up to a whole lot that I'm not willing to do. So is that acceptable with council, is for you to look over this and email Brent with any edits, corrections, additions, deletions? Speak your mind on that, and maybe we can incorporate something that would be part of our code. Yes, no, maybe so.
Kick it down the road.
All right. Councilwoman Bryant Ward.
So, Madam Mayor, if you get no feedback, are we going to later see that this has been enacted? Because you feel strongly about it, and I hear you. So if you get no feedback, are you going to enact it?
We have to have a majority, and right now we don't have a majority. We have 2 and 2, and I mean, I'm the tiebreaker, but I'm listening to you. I hear you, and I just, whether it's positive or negative feedback, this is what we're asking for, or I'm asking for, to see if this is something that we can put into our code as a protection for us moving on. Fair enough? All right. We'll circle back on this one. Okay. That brings us to matters of information. Mr. Manuel?
I don't have much for information. Future work session topics, we will have the ARPA budget next week, along with commissioner reappointments consideration, and probably have a proposed amendment to the personnel manual. Council.
All right, thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything? Oops, sorry.
Madam Mayor, this is Michelle. We had talked about, trying to get a council picture to put on the website. And since you're all going to be together on Saturday, February 19th, I'm trying to get the photographer to come up that day. Is that a problem with anybody?
Oh,
it's hard to get the five in one place at once.
So you're saying a team photo, Michelle?
Yes, a team photo.
We may have to do the same for the staff.
So what's the dress uniform for that picture? Sorry, but gotta ask the question. That's fine.
No, but you know what? It's what you want in your picture. And then we could quickly change if we'd like.
Yeah. I've inquired with the photographer. I haven't got a confirmation, but I thought that may be the best time to get the 5 of you in one place at one time.
And perhaps getting it on the dais. That would be nice. And for that, it would be just like any other virtual meeting. Professional on the top. Whatever else you want to wear on the bottom, as long as you remember that you're in a public meeting afterwards. So that wouldn't be that. I have no opposition to that. Council, are you okay with that on the 19th?
That's fine. Sure.
All right. The matters of information that I do have is this Saturday. I have to shout out to our amazing Kelly Phipps. She has gone again above and beyond for our health care, so Feed the Frontline, and you all have received information on that. We're blasting it out on Facebook. We've got a lot of people that are sharing. Our frontline, they've been through a lot during this COVID, and while we do have recognition during certain times of the year for our healthcare workers, this has been unprecedented, and they have worked very, very long hours, and they had an ask, and their ask was, can we show a plate of love is the way I interpret it. And they asked for maybe some snacks, maybe some good wishes, just some encouragement, because it's been long days and very, some have been very, very trying. So on Saturday from 10 to 2, we will be hosting a snack drive or a food drive at Safeway and collecting snacks and drinks for our healthcare heroes. And while I wanted to do a proclamation, boy, today got away from me. And so I am just going to piggyback on what the governor has said. And many have not seen what the governor has said. He proclaimed this week, February 7th to February 13th, as Healthcare Heroes Appreciation Week. And I'm just going to read what he says. It's pretty short. He says, whereas on January 4th, 2022, the state of Maryland declared a 30-day state of emergency in response to the COVID Omicron variant. And whereas our frontline healthcare workers, including doctors, nurses, EMS workers, and first responders, pharmacists, laboratory technicians, mental health professionals, and critical clinic staff have continued to lead the state's public health response with tireless professionalism. And whereas over the course of the 30-day state of emergency, the state of Maryland has reported substantial improvements in key health metrics, including significant declines in hospitalization. And whereas our frontline healthcare workers and their families deserve our greatest and deepest gratitude for their sacrifices. And whereas residents and organizations across Maryland wish to express their sincere appreciation to our frontline healthcare heroes for continuing to exemplify the definition of Maryland Strong. Now, therefore, I, Lawrence J. Hogan Jr., Governor of the State of Maryland, do hereby proclaim February 7th to the 13th, 2022 as Healthcare Heroes Appreciation Week in Maryland, and do commend this observation to all of our citizens. And I encourage all of our citizens here to do the same. You know, if you see someone at the healthcare as a healthcare worker, let them know that they are greatly appreciated. And to all that can come out on Saturday, we will have thank you cards that can be signed. We will have a photo booth that pictures can be taken so we can post on social media, and we will be collecting snacks just to show the love. So that is what I wanted to say about Healthcare Heroes, and they are always very, very appreciated in our town and throughout the country. So with that said, do we have anybody who would like to speak this evening? If you do, please state your name, your address, and whether you're in the incorporated town. And if you could limit it to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. All right, hearing none, if I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Okay, I second it. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Y'all are tough today. All right, motion carries. Hope to see you all Saturday. Have a great week, and thank you for your hard work today. Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, staff.